Dear Millionaires, I love the podcast. I don't agree with all the viewers who say that Riley looks like a caveman. I see their point, but they're just being mean. I own a window business that has just crossed the $1 million mark. I feel like it's time for me to hire a sales manager. I found the guy I want, and I want to offer him equity in my business to make sure he gives it his all. My wife thinks I'm crazy because he doesn't have window experience. Would you recommend making him a 50-50 partner? Or to keep my wife happy, just giving him maybe 20% equity in the business? What will get this guy to work as hard as I do to make this business successful?
Okay. My issue is that sales managers usually fail. And this guy doesn't have any window experience. Even if he did have window experience, there's a good chance there's a cultural misfit, they just don't like working together. And once the guy owns 20% of your business, he owns 20% of your business. He can just quit. You still have to give him 20% of your business forever. And if you go to sell the company, he gets 20% of the proceeds. I don't see how you want to be married to somebody who doesn't even have a track record with you. I don't, you know how we feel about partnerships on this podcast anyway. Partnerships are terrible, but to do it with a stranger who has no track record in the window business, man, this could only end badly, I think. Well, what's your take, Asher?
Yeah, honestly, I agree with you, Mr. Rob. I do not think he should give him anything. Just as a sales manager too, why should he deserve 20% of the company? Like you said, what if he just quits? That risk to reward ratio just isn't well enough for him to do that,
All right, so there is an option here, and that is to use phantom stock options, which means that the guy can, on paper, get 20% of the company profit. Now, I don't think you should be doing this either, but you can give someone 20% of phantom stock in the business. What that does is it gives the sales manager incentive to not only grow sales, but to control expenses, because he'll make 20% of the net profit of the business. And then if the company sells, let's say it grows more and they sell out, he gets 20% of the equity in the business when it sells. But if he ever quits, his phantom stock goes away. He doesn't get paid for it. If he quits or gets fired, then his ownership disappears in the company. Now, it's a risk for him, the sales manager, because what if the guy who owns the business decides to sell it, and so that he doesn't have to give 20% of the ownership of the business to the sales manager, he just kind of fires him a week before the sale. Yeah. So he doesn't really, in that case, have a lot of options. But at any rate, a really good pay plan should incentivize a sales manager. And he shouldn't have to give up 20% of his business in order to get the sales manager to do his job.
I was going to say, I would still say there's going to be people out there who are going to have that mentality of wanting to grow it and grow it and grow it and make the most out of the 20%. And so it's just, you got to find the right person, and you got to find a way to know someone really well and really gain their trust. And whether that's just putting them through different tasks or whatever, just to find out if they're the right person for you. And there's definitely people who are going to make the most out of that 20%. So I think for a lot of people, giving away 20%, it's not first choice, but I'm not saying it's a bad choice.
So the place where this works and has worked really well is in the car business. So the largest dealer group in the United States, what they do is they pick a really smart guy, or a guy who has got a tremendous track record in the car business, and they'll give him 20% of the dealership. And that way the owner who owns hundreds of dealerships doesn't really have to mind the store. He doesn't have to worry about what's going to happen there, because that owner, that 20% owner, who's, local, how can a guy from, I don't know where he's at in New York, manage a dealership in Florida? He doesn't have to. If he's got a local owner, that guy's going to really fight for the profitability of the dealership and make sure customers are happy. And so it's worked really well for him. And that's a pretty typical dealership model. Truth is, though, if something goes wrong in that store, or if the sales manager, the general manager, the 20% owner is not performing, he's going to get fired just like an employee would. And that 20% goes away. That 20% is going to go to the next owner of the dealership. And the risk that he loses out on 20%, if he, let's say the owner sells it and he fires him the week before, so he doesn't have to pay the 20%. Well, that's not a risk, because the biggest dealer group in the United States, he has no intention of not being the biggest dealer in the United States, right? He's never going to sell any of his dealerships. He buys them, he never sells them. So it's worked out really well for him. Just don't think that it sounds like this, with no experience in the window business, is the kind of character you would give that kind of a deal to. Because I promise you, none of the guys that these big dealer groups put in place are like brand new to the car business.
Yeah, so I think if he gives them 20%, like no one values something they're just given as much as like they've earned it, you know? Say you run a marathon, right? And you earn that, you work for it, you train for months, and you finally get to it, you run the whole thing, you finish it, you get the medal, right? Like that's rewarding to see that medal in your hand. But let's say you just walk off the street, you walk to the finish line, you just take an Uber to the finish line and get the medal. Like there's no reward or like satisfaction in earning that, right? Because it was just handed to you. So you don't appreciate it as much, right? He gets that 20%, he's just not going to value it.
Yeah. I think the model for that is youth sports. I mean, why do JV teams exist? To train up the next varsity player, surely. But all that time that you spend, you know, sitting on the bench or whatever, being a JV player, and even being on the bench in varsity, like that time gets you more committed to where when you are a starter, then you're just like, you're not going to throw that away. You're going to do your practice. You're going to really fight through it and give it everything you have. So guys, have you had that situation? Have you given somebody stock and you regret it? Do you have somebody you're trying to recruit? Have you had an experience using phantom stock option? Let us know in the comments below or message us. We'd love to have you on our podcast. And thank you again for liking and subscribing.